So, one of the features you use a lot as a content creator in Elite Dangerous is the external camera suite. And during the current incursions, I noticed I was having a much harder time getting shots of things like carriers if I was using Odyssey. The camera has always had a tendency to sometimes black out if it clips into an object, for example, but this seems to be happening a lot more in Odyssey than in Horizons. And what I have found it comes down to is that the camera seems to require line of sight to the player in Odyssey. If anything comes between the camera and the player, the camera feed will black out. Here in Horizons, as you can see, the carrier can block line of sight to the player, but we still maintain our camera feed. There is a point at the front of the carrier that has always been a problem for obscuring the camera, which we'll see shortly, but overall, the camera feed remains clear and it is quite easy to get nice panning shots of the carrier. When this test is repeated in Odyssey, you'll notice that any obstruction between the player and the camera causes the camera to immediately black out. So a carrier is a very large and substantial object. I decided to run a few more tests on other objects in Elite, starting with stations. This is Obsidian Orbital in Maya. Let's see what happens if we allow parts of the station to come between our ship and the external camera in Horizons. As you can probably already guess, in Odyssey, the camera blacks out every time the camera loses line of sight to the player. Even momentary breaks cause this behaviour. Note when the support cable comes by and how long the blackout lasts. So finally I decided to test on a planetary surface using the SRV. I cannot test on foot as only Odyssey has this functionality, but here we have the most ambiguous result in Horizons. For the most part, losing line of sight does not black out the camera, though like with the carrier earlier, there are some spots, like if the camera is dropped too low, or the large tower you see here, that do cause blackouts. But these do not seem to be directly tied to line of sight to the player. Next was to try in Odyssey, same outpost in HR1185. This time I got shot at, so initially tested from the exterior, but I observed the same behaviour. Then I did find a spot on the platform where I was safe from gunfire, and as you can guess, the camera again blacks out if line of sight is broken. So I can think of two reasons this is occurring. One is that it's possibly a bug, and if so, I think as long as it is acknowledged as such, I would be happy to consider it a low priority in comparison to the other major bugs and problems in Odyssey right now. The other is that this is intended behaviour, possibly to prevent the external camera being used during on-foot combat to see more than the players should. This is a guess based solely on what would warrant such a change to the camera in Odyssey, if this is an intentional change, so please feel free to take this with a pinch of salt. But on-foot combat was added in Odyssey, and external or third-person cameras are a concern in some of the games I've been involved with, like Armour for example, where the third-person camera can be used to see beyond cover or around corners. But I would also argue that the arcadey arena shooter style combat of Odyssey's on-foot gameplay is very different from the slower and more tactical gameplay of something like Armour, where a single bullet can kill you outright. And so attempting to use the quite clunky external camera to gain an advantage would offer much less utility. AI behaviour in Odyssey is far more like simple FPS bots than a coherent team, and the fast pace of conflict zones coupled with a lot of spongy damage capacity would in my opinion render the use of the external camera for an advantage moot. Again, this last part is speculation more than anything, and I hope that this is another bug of Odyssey. The old camera behaviour was far more favourable to content creators, and it would be very nice to see it return in Odyssey. Here in Horizons, as you can see, the carrier can block line... Tricks be good, baby. I'm going to record this in a minute. Hang on.